My beautiful Sagittarius souls, I'm really happy to be sitting here with you today. There's a very unusual energy moving around Sagittarius right now. It feels like life is quietly opening up new space for you, new doors, and maybe even a new version of yourself. I don't know if you've been feeling that lately, but something inside you feels ready to move again, ready to expand, ready to break out of that feeling of standing still for too long. And honestly, that's the exact energy I felt the moment I started looking into this reading. So today, let's open this space up together for a little while. Let's see what Spirit may be trying to show Sagittarius as you move through this season of change. And the very first thing I felt when I looked into this reading is that Sagittarius doesn't fully belong in the old space anymore. Not in the sense that everything around you has suddenly changed. It's more like something inside of you started shifting first. Very quietly, very hard to explain. Maybe lately, Sagittarius, you've still been going to work like usual. Still replying to messages, still driving down the same familiar roads, still sitting in the same room at the end of the day. But somewhere in those small, almost invisible moments, it feels like your mind has started looking beyond where you are right now. Like there's a part of you that doesn't want to keep living inside the same rhythm anymore. And when the Fool card comes through in this reading, I don't see impulsive energy here. It feels more like someone standing in front of a brand new doorway in life, still quiet, still observing, but deep down already knowing they can't fully return to the old version of themselves anymore. The Fool card always carries the energy of a beginning. But sometimes, beginnings don't arrive with some huge dramatic moment. Sometimes they arrive softly. Like the moment you realize you want to try something different. Go farther, change your environment, step out of a cycle that's felt repetitive for far too long. Some Sagittarius souls may have been thinking more about movement lately. A new journey, a new job, a different version of yourself. Or maybe it's as simple as wanting to breathe different air again. I keep seeing this image of a long road under soft blue and violet lights. Someone walking slowly through the night, not exactly sad, but no longer wanting to stay still either. And what's interesting is, this reading doesn't feel forceful. Spirit isn't trying to rush Sagittarius forward. If anything, this feels like a season where you're being allowed to expand more naturally. You don't need to know your entire future right now. You don't need every answer immediately. You just need to start listening to the feeling growing quietly inside of you. Because sometimes, life doesn't open new doors with loud knocking sounds. Sometimes it opens them through a tiny feeling in your heart, repeating itself over and over again, until eventually you can't pretend you don't hear it anymore. And then the Page of Wands card appears. This card feels so connected to Sagittarius energy. Curiosity, exploration. That feeling of wanting to move toward a new horizon, even without knowing exactly what's waiting there yet. There's a younger energy returning inside of you right now. Not immature, more like the part of you that wants to live more honestly again. Some Sagittarius viewers may have gone through a heavier season before this, feeling trapped inside responsibilities, repetitive routines, or environments that slowly made you forget how much freedom used to matter to you. But the Page of Wands card feels like the first spark returning, not loud, not overwhelming, but enough to make you quietly think, maybe I still want more than this. And honestly, I think that's something really beautiful about this reading. Because Sagittarius was never meant to live inside spaces that feel too small for the soul. And when your spirit starts feeling restricted, it naturally begins searching for movement again. Maybe through a new idea, an unexpected conversation, a short trip, a new hobby. Or maybe just the sudden urge to change something about the room you live in. Small things. But they feel like signs that a new chapter is slowly beginning to open. I also feel like Sagittarius is becoming more sensitive to sudden inspiration lately. There may be nights where you're lying still, and suddenly your mind drifts far into the future. Not in an anxious way, more like your soul is beginning to sense a wider horizon ahead of you. And maybe the most important thing during this season isn't forcing yourself to move faster. Maybe it's allowing yourself to believe that you're still capable of beginning again with completely different energy. Because sometimes, the biggest calling in your life doesn't come from outside of you. It comes from that quiet moment when something inside finally whispers, maybe it's time to move forward now. And what Spirit wants Sagittarius to see next in this reading has a lot to do with who's truly holding the steering wheel of your life. Because honestly, it feels like for a long time, Sagittarius has been trying to become the version of themselves that other people considered reasonable. Reasonable for the family, reasonable for work, reasonable for everyone else's expectations. And sometimes that happens so slowly, you don't even realize how quiet you've become with yourself. I keep seeing this image of someone sitting alone in their car after a long day, red lights reflecting against the window, the phone buzzing a few times, but not wanting to answer right away. Not necessarily because you're tired, but because there are too many thoughts inside you that still don't fully have words yet. And when the Justice card appears here, I don't experience this as a card of judgment. It feels deeply personal, like the moment you begin becoming more honest with yourself. Some Sagittarius souls may be realizing lately that they've spent too much time trying to keep everyone else comfortable, trying to explain themselves, trying to keep the peace, trying to stay inside environments their heart no longer truly connects with anymore. Sometimes Sagittarius carries this energy of "I'm fine" out into the world, even when internally the energy is slowly draining away. And the hardest part isn't always leaving a place behind. Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that certain paths that once felt completely right for you don't fit who you're becoming anymore. The Justice card carries this feeling of inner balance. But before balance returns, there's usually a period where you begin clearly seeing what's been disconnecting you from yourself. Maybe it's a relationship that constantly makes you shrink yourself smaller. A job that no longer gives you any real spark when you wake up in the morning. Or maybe it's simply staying inside the same familiar rhythm for so long that you forgot you once had completely different dreams for your life. And honestly, I feel like Sagittarius is getting very close to that realization now. That moment where you quietly ask yourself, if I truly allowed myself to live according to what I actually feel, would I still want to stay here? And that's not an easy question. Because the older people get, the easier it becomes to stay attached to what feels familiar, even when it slowly suffocates you. Some people stay inside the same old room for so long, they forget what it feels like to open the window and let fresh air in again. And then the Hermit card comes through. This card slows the entire energy of the reading down. But it doesn't feel lonely in a dark way. It feels more like someone finally sitting alone with themselves after too much noise for too long. I keep feeling like Sagittarius has been wanting to pull back a little lately. Talking less, explaining less. There may be messages you read, but leave unanswered for hours. Conversations that exhaust you, even though nobody technically did anything wrong. Because your soul is craving enough silence to hear its own voice again. And what's interesting is, sometimes the journey of reclaiming yourself doesn't begin by running far away. Sometimes it begins by finally admitting what you truly feel. Being able to say, I don't feel okay with this anymore. I don't want to keep pretending. I need a different direction for my life. And I think that's why this reading feels so open, so spacious. It doesn't feel trapped. It feels more like someone standing in front of an open doorway, still glancing back one last time. Not because they want to return, but because they're trying to understand everything they've walked through to get here. And maybe Sagittarius doesn't need to force themselves to have every answer right now. Some journeys begin with nothing more than a tiny feeling that you don't want to keep abandoning yourself just to keep everything around you comfortable anymore. And as Spirit keeps expanding this reading, I can feel a very different kind of energy beginning to form inside Sagittarius now. It no longer feels like you're just trying to escape anymore. It feels more like you're trying to build a life that actually belongs to you. And honestly, I think that's a huge difference. Because there are seasons in life where people only want to run away from what feels heavy. But then there are other seasons where you begin to clearly imagine where you truly want to go instead. And Sagittarius feels very connected to that energy right now, not loud, not needing to announce to the entire world that you're changing. But deep inside, a new version of you is slowly being built piece by piece. And when the 8 of Pentacles card comes through, it makes me think about very ordinary evenings. Someone sitting in front of a laptop after most of the room has already gone dark. An unfinished notebook beside a glass of water that's gone cold. The soft sound of typing filling a quiet room. Nobody really sees the full process. But those small repetitive moments happening in silence, they're the exact things quietly changing someone's life from the inside out. Some Sagittarius viewers may have started learning something new lately, or thinking more seriously about your work, your direction, your image, even the way you want to show up in the world. And this doesn't feel temporary to me. It feels more like you're beginning to understand something important. If you want your life to feel different, then the foundation underneath it has to become different too. And that's what I really love about the 8 of Pentacles card here. It's not obsessed with instant success. It speaks more about patience, focus, the kind of maturity that comes from returning to your own life every single day, even when the results still aren't fully visible yet. Maybe Sagittarius used to be the kind of soul that loved complete freedom, moving with inspiration, following whatever felt exciting in the moment. But this reading shows a more grounded version of you, beginning to emerge now. A version that doesn't only want to experience life, but wants to actually create something meaningful that can last. And then the Ace of Pentacles card opens up in the reading like a very quiet doorway. Not blinding light. More like the soft lamp inside a new apartment the first time you walk in. Everything is still empty, still unfinished. But somehow, you already know this place has the potential to become home. That's the feeling I get around Sagittarius right now. Certain things in your life are beginning to take new shape. Maybe it's a work opportunity, a personal project, a creative direction, a decision connected to finances, your living environment, or the kind of future you want to build for yourself. And what feels important here is, the Ace of Pentacles card isn't only about material things. It's also the feeling of finally finding something you genuinely want to pour your energy into. Not to prove yourself to anyone, but because for the first time in a long time, it actually feels connected to who you are. I keep seeing Sagittarius standing inside a grocery store close to closing time. Bright white lights reflecting across the quiet floor. You're holding a few completely ordinary things in your hands. But your mind is drifting far into the future, thinking about your life years from now. And maybe that sounds strange. But sometimes these very normal moments are where people suddenly realize they're growing up emotionally. Not only living for the present anymore, but beginning to think about foundation, about where they want to belong, about the future version of themselves, and how to slowly move closer to that person. Then the Emperor card comes through, and immediately the energy feels more stable, more solid, no longer just dreaming or imagining. I feel Sagittarius learning how to direct your energy differently now, learning how to become more intentional with the things you truly want to build. And honestly, the Emperor card doesn't feel rigid here, at least not in this reading. It feels more like someone finally understanding that real freedom isn't only about being able to go anywhere you want. Sometimes, real freedom also comes from creating a life that feels emotionally safe to exist inside of. Some Sagittarius souls may be entering a season where you want to stabilize certain parts of your life. Not because you've lost your adventurous spirit, but because your soul wants solid ground beneath it, so bigger dreams can actually survive long term. And I think that's why this reading carries both expansion and structure at the same time. It's like you're no longer only standing in front of a new doorway. You're beginning to imagine what life might actually look like on the other side of it. But what's interesting is, the closer Sagittarius gets to this new version of yourself, the more you begin realizing that certain parts of you are truly asking for rest now. Because not every slowdown is a sign that you're moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes, it's just your body and mind trying to pull you back toward a more natural rhythm after carrying too much tension for too long. And I feel this very strongly when the Temperance card comes through in the reading. There's something inside Sagittarius right now that's trying to find balance again. Not the kind of balance where everything feels perfectly peaceful all the time. More like a very human kind of balance. Between wanting to keep moving forward and finally admitting that you're tired too. Sagittarius tends to carry a lot of energy internally. And when inspiration hits, you can keep going endlessly. There are nights where you're lying in bed, but your mind is still moving fast. Thinking about plans. Thinking about the future. Thinking about everything that still feels unfinished. But this reading almost feels like Spirit gently placing a hand on your shoulder and saying, you don't have to run this hard anymore. I keep seeing this image of someone driving late into the night. The radio playing softly, the highway almost completely empty. City lights fading behind the windshield. And eventually, they pull over at a small gas station somewhere off the road. Not because they've given up. The car just needs fuel if it's going to keep going farther. That's the energy the Temperance card carries here. It's not asking Sagittarius to give up on what you want. It's asking you to stop treating yourself like a machine that always has to keep pushing forward. Some Sagittarius viewers may have been overthinking more than usual lately, especially toward the end of the day. Everything may still look fine on the outside, but internally it feels like too many tabs are open in your mind at once. And what really stands out to me is, part of this exhaustion comes from trying to control too many things at the same time. Controlling outcomes, controlling emotions, controlling timing, trying to make life unfold exactly the way you imagined it would. But life doesn't always move in perfectly straight lines. Some things need time to emotionally form inside of you before they begin moving in the external world. And Sagittarius, I think you're learning how to move through your journey more slowly now, not because your fire is disappearing, but because every fire needs space to breathe. Then the Four of Swords card appears, and the entire energy of the reading becomes even quieter. This card makes me think about very small moments that are actually deeply necessary. Sleeping in a little later than usual, a weekend where you don't respond to every message, a night spent lying still, watching light reflect across the ceiling, without opening another video or distracting yourself again. And honestly, I think Sagittarius has been strong for a very long time. So long that sometimes you forget you're allowed to rest without feeling guilty about it. Some people only feel valuable when they're busy, when they're doing something, when they're progressing towards something. But the Four of Swords card asks a very different question. If you stopped for a moment today, would you still believe you deserve peace? And honestly, that feels like a very deep question in this reading, because Sagittarius is naturally connected to movement, to searching for what's next. But Spirit is showing me that some of the answers you're looking for right now will only appear once your mind becomes quiet enough to hear them. Not when you force yourself to think harder, but when you finally allow yourself to truly rest. Then the Nine of Wands card appears like the image of someone who's already traveled a very long road. I don't see weakness here. If anything, I see resilience. But I also see exhaustion you don't always talk about out loud. There may have been periods where you felt like you always had to hold yourself together, handle everything alone, stay strong. And over time, the body begins holding on to all of that pressure. I keep seeing Sagittarius sitting alone in the kitchen very late at night. Only a dim yellow light above the sink, the entire house completely silent. It's the kind of moment where someone finally realizes how exhausted they actually are, after spending the entire day pretending to be okay. But what I love about the Nine of Wands card is that even though the person is tired, they haven't abandoned the journey. They're just learning how to move differently now. Less self-pressure, less resistance against the flow of life, less need to prove they can carry everything alone. And maybe Sagittarius doesn't need to be perfect during this season. You don't need to speed up just because other people seem to be moving faster. Some of the biggest journeys in life only mature when a person learns how to slow down at the right time. And strangely enough, the moment Sagittarius begins breathing a little more slowly again, I start to see a completely different kind of light becoming brighter around you. It no longer feels like the energy of someone constantly trying. It feels more like the kind of light that appears when a person finally begins returning to themselves again. And honestly, I think that's what makes this reading feel so special. Because there are people who try so hard to be noticed that they end up blending into the crowd even more. And then there are people who simply walk into a room fully connected to their own energy, and everyone around them feels it naturally. Sagittarius carries a lot of that energy right now. Not overly performative, not trying to become someone else. But there's something about your presence lately that makes people want to look in your direction more. And when the Queen of Wands card appears here, it feels like a very beautiful kind of fire. Not the kind that burns everything down. More like the kind of warmth that makes people feel inspired just standing near it. I think Sagittarius is slowly stepping out of a season of hiding. There may have been times in the past where you doubted yourself deeply. Times where you felt like you had to change pieces of yourself just to fit the environment around you. But the Queen of Wands card carries the energy of someone who finally stops asking permission to be themselves. And strangely enough, the more honest Sagittarius becomes with your own energy, the more magnetic you seem to become. I keep seeing this image of someone walking into a cafe late in the afternoon. Golden light reflecting against the windows. You're just sitting quietly reading something or staring out at the street. But somehow people still notice your energy. Not because you look perfect, but because something inside you feels alive again. Some Sagittarius viewers may have started changing the way you dress lately, the way you speak, the way you present yourself online. Or maybe you simply don't feel like hiding your personality anymore. And honestly, this doesn't feel like image building to me. It feels more like the process of finally allowing yourself to visibly exist inside your own life again. Then the Star card comes through, and the entire atmosphere of the reading softens. This card feels deeply healing, but not the kind of healing that comes from pretending the pain never happened. It feels more like the light that appears after someone has walked through a very long season of emotional exhaustion. I think Sagittarius has changed more than you fully realize. Things that once triggered strong emotional reactions in you don't seem to stay lodged in your heart the same way anymore. Certain sadnesses that once felt unbearably heavy now feel quieter somehow. Not because they never hurt, but because you've slowly become larger than the emotions that once consumed you. The Star card also makes me think about Sagittarius becoming more visible now, maybe through social media, work, a personal project, or simply through people beginning to recognize your value more clearly than before. But what I love most about this card is that it doesn't ask Sagittarius to become some completely different person in order to be seen. If anything, it feels like the more you release old layers of protection, the easier your real light becomes to recognize. I keep seeing someone sitting beside a window close to midnight, your phone resting nearby, the screen lighting up every few minutes with new messages, new opportunities, new connections. And somewhere in that moment, you realize your life is slowly opening in a different direction, lighter, wider, more honest. Then the Six of Wands card appears like a very interesting signal in the reading, not some huge dramatic victory. More like finally being acknowledged after quietly carrying yourself through a long, invisible journey. Because there are parts of your story nobody fully sees. Nobody sees the nights Sagittarius couldn't sleep. Nobody sees the moments you doubted yourself. Nobody sees how many times you had to emotionally rebuild yourself from the ground up. But the Six of Wands card shows me that your energy is beginning to create a stronger impact on the world around you now. And honestly, the most beautiful part is that this influence isn't coming from perfection. It's coming from authenticity. Sagittarius may not even realize this yet, but when someone reconnects with their own soul, people feel it very quickly. You don't have to over-explain yourself. You don't have to force anything. Energy speaks on its own. And maybe for the first time in a long while, I'm not seeing Sagittarius simply trying to survive life anymore. I'm seeing someone beginning to actually step into their life with a completely different kind of light around them. But at the same time, Spirit also shows me that for this new energy to fully expand, Sagittarius may need to finally put down a few things that have become too heavy to keep carrying. And honestly, I think this may be the deepest part of the entire reading. Because sometimes, the thing that exhausts people the most isn't the future ahead of them. It's the things they're still carrying from the past. Some Sagittarius souls have gotten so used to holding too much inside for too long. Old thoughts, old disappointments, old versions of yourself. And over time, you start carrying those things as if they've become part of your identity. But when the Death card appears here, I don't experience this energy as frightening. It feels more like a door slowly closing, no loud noise, no dramatic resistance. Just your soul beginning to understand that certain things have already completed their purpose in your life. I keep seeing this image of a room right before the seasons change. You open your closet and notice clothes you haven't worn in years, but still keep hanging there. Not because you still need them, but because they remind you of an older version of yourself. And honestly, emotions can work the same way. People hold on to old sadness, not because it still fits who they are, but because they've gotten used to carrying it. Some Sagittarius viewers are entering a season where you're beginning to realize that certain pains you once thought would stay forever are actually starting to leave very slowly, not disappearing all at once, more like the tide quietly pulling back after hours. You only notice how much lighter things feel when you compare yourself to who you were a few months ago. And what feels important in this reading is, Spirit isn't asking Sagittarius to instantly become a completely new person. It's simply asking you to stop clinging to things that no longer truly connect with your soul anymore. Maybe it's an old belief that keeps telling you you're not enough, a pattern of procrastination rooted in fear of beginning, a relationship that constantly makes you question your own feelings. Or sometimes, it's simply the version of Sagittarius that always feels forced to stay strong. Then the Judgment card appears, and honestly, it feels like a very quiet awakening happening inside you now. Not the kind of transformation everyone notices immediately. More like the moment you begin looking at your life through completely different eyes. I think Sagittarius is slowly realizing that maturity isn't about going backward and fixing every part of the past. It's about learning how to move forward without letting the past continue controlling you. There may be nights where you are lying still in the dark, your phone screen shut off hours ago, only the soft sound of a fan moving through the room. And suddenly, you remember something that once hurt you deeply. But for the first time, your heart doesn't react the same way anymore. That's the kind of quiet healing the Judgment card carries. Not forgetting. Not pretending it never mattered. Just finally becoming calm enough to look back without getting trapped inside the memory again. And I also feel Sagittarius beginning to hear your own inner voice more clearly now. Less dependent on what other people think. Less interested in living inside old expectations. Something inside you is slowly waking up, very quietly, but very honestly. Like someone who spent a long time living in a dim room, finally opening the curtains and letting fresh air inside again. Then the Ten of Wands card appears like the final image of a very long journey. I can feel the exhaustion in this card, but not hopelessness. It feels more like someone finally admitting they've been carrying too many things that were never truly theirs to hold in the first place. Sagittarius has a tendency to carry everything alone, handling emotions alone, pulling yourself back together alone, trying to stay strong alone. But the Ten of Wands card shows something important. Some burdens only disappear once you're willing to finally put them down. Not because you're weak, but because nobody was meant to carry everything forever. I keep seeing this image of someone walking home very late at night. The street almost completely empty. You open the door to a quiet room, drop your bag onto the floor, and stand there silently in the dark for a few seconds. And honestly, sometimes the first moment of healing isn't when everything becomes perfect. Sometimes it's simply the moment you finally stop forcing yourself to hold everything together. And I think that may be the biggest message in this entire reading. Sagittarius doesn't need to keep carrying everything just to prove you're strong. Some new doors only open when your hands become light enough to push them forward. And maybe real freedom doesn't begin by running far away. Maybe it begins the moment you finally allow yourself to release the thing that's been weighing down your heart for far too long.